Hello, welcome to Speech Talk Live, episode number 32. My name is Jay Oza, and I'm the host of this show. And we have Julie Finkelstein, who's a regular on this show. And she's a mentor, just like me, for the Coursera's excellent public speaking course called Introduction to Public Speaking. So we are loosely affiliated with that course in a sense that we do mentor it. But this is a community that we have created as a way to help people to work more closely and develop their public speaking skills. So we try to do several things in this community, opportunity to share information about public speaking. We also do this weekly show called Speech Talk Live. And the whole community as a whole is to learn, to teach, to share, to support, and also to kind of create a safe environment, trusting environment, so that nobody feels like they're going to be ridiculed or criticized or anything like that. Because public speaking, let's face it, it's really hard. It's fearful for a lot of people, for just about everybody. And it can be time consuming and frustrating. So we create this as a way for people to practice and learn at the same time, because I always think of public speaking as a work in progress. You're never really, good at it. I kind of think of it as golf, right? Golf is a game of mistakes. There are no perfect. It's impossible to get a perfect score in golf, right? And same thing as public speaking. There are no perfect speeches, and they are different. Just like when you play golf, you play on different courses. Same thing with speaking. Every time you speak, you are in a different setting, different people, different environment. Everything changes. So think of speaking like golf, right? If golf is something you play or you understand. So today's agenda is we usually start out by doing a quick intro, and today we just have Julie on, so it'll be fast. And then we move into this segment. We call it the 3-minute speech segment. Now, this is a free, open 3-minute segment where you can talk about any specific topic that you're interested in. And today I'm going to use it to talk about this method that Jerry Seinfeld used when he was becoming a comic. So I'll talk about that in 3 minutes. And then we're going to move into our set agenda, and we typically have 3 segments. And the first segment, we're going to review a speech that was sent by another mentor for this Introduction to Public Speaking course, Sana, who is based out of Tunisia. And she said, she wanted somebody to look at this speech and provide some review it. So I thought it would be a good idea to put it on the show, and we can do it as as part of the program. It's one of the segments. So we're going to do that. It's a speech given by Benjamon Bratton. He's a professor at University of California, San Diego. And his speech is about TED. He's against TED. And he talks about some of the reasons why he's against TED. And I'll give you my feedback, review. I'll review it, and then Julie can review it, and we'll have a discussion on it. The second segment is it's a simple topic, but it could be, it's an important topic. It's like everything, there has to be that ultimate question, right? And this idea comes from customer service. So we're going to talk about what is the ultimate question when you're giving a speech. You need to know that. It's from the audience point of view. And we're going to talk about, depending on what kind of speech you're giving, could be an intro, could be an impromptu, could be an informative or persuasive. But there has to be that one ultimate question you've got to ask that tells you whether your speech is going to be a success or a failure. The third segment, it's a little bit kind of inside baseball, perhaps. It's a persuasive speech, but this is tied to the Coursera course, Introduction to Public Speaking. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is because I review quite a few of these speeches, and there are not that many because very few people get that far. But what I've noticed is that they tend to be very good with their stock issues, the ill blames and consequences and call to action. But there is no emotional persuasion there. So I want to talk about that, why that is the case, what I've observed, and what I think might be the reason. and we can have a discussion on that. So that's the show for today. And at this point, I would like Julie to introduce herself, and then we can move to our 3-minute speech segment. Julie?
Thank you, Jay. Good morning. So my name is Julie Wu Finkelstein, because sometimes when I say I'm Julie Finkelstein, they expect a European. I'm from Hong Kong, China, Canada, Chicago, and here today I'm in Stanford. One of the things I'm doing is I'm writing a book. I'm actually going to do it the way Jay talks about the movie industry. Is first you write the trailer, and then you write the book. When you produce a movie, you produce a trailer to get people excited, and then you produce the movie. So I'm creating a book, a cheat sheet, or a booklet on 10 stretches for love and life, transforming yourself and your life stretch by stretch. That's it. And I'll talk about that later. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, that's good, Julie. I like, yeah, any help I can provide, just ask me. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this book or seeing its progress. So I'm going to keep asking you how your book's going. And just a quick update, I forgot to mention that I am also working on a book. So as you can see, we are potential authors here besides speakers. So we're stretching this to the next level here. So my book is actually going to be very topical. It's going to be about public speaking. Now, writing a book, as many of you probably know, is really difficult for a number of reasons, because it's like it's testing yourself, because you got to find time. Anyway, I don't want to go into too many details of that. But this first book is going to be essentially my journey as a speaker. And I talk about the Coursera course. What I do not do is I don't duplicate what's already taught in the course, because if it's done well, you don't want to take it. And I do simplify some of the stuff that I've noticed, but I don't go into it in the detail that you would get taking the course that Dr. McGarity teaches on the Coursera platform, because that's a 10-week course, and I'm not going to duplicate what he has done. So I talk about my journey, and in a process, I think it'll help people who want to become, I would call it, let's say if you're adequate, you go from adequate to good, and then you keep continuing and you become, a great speaker. So at this point, I'm going to take a pause, and we're going to move into our 3-minute speech segment. Okay, welcome back to Speech Talk Live, episode number 32. And at this point, we're going to do our 3-minute speech segment. Today, my topic is somewhat related to something that I had talked about in the past. So and this is again something that's going to be in my book, when people ask me, if I want to take this course and become a let's say, I call it good to great speaker, what do I do? And, I have my thing. I say, well, first you got to make a goals video. You got to have a goals on what you really like. Why do you want to become a good speaker? What are you trying to, is it a hobby? Is it something related to influence, persuade, connect, whatever, sell? And then I said, you need that, because you have to go back and find somebody who'll keep you accountable. So goals video is very important, and record that and keep it private. And then the second thing I say is that then after that, you want to take this Coursera course, Introduction to Public Speaking. It's a 10-week course, and find time, otherwise don't take it, because it is a pretty intense course. And if you want to do it, if you want to learn it, you're going to have to spend the time. And I've said minimum, I've calculated, is if you're taking it for the first time, you plan on spending between 100 to 150 hours if you really want to go from adequate to good. But then what happens afterwards? Then I said, well, afterwards, you got to really have to develop and turn this into a habit. And then I came up with this something called 330 challenge, where you basically record a 3-minute video for 30 straight days and turn this into a habit. So then I came across this interesting technique from Jerry Seinfeld. And this was in a blog, and I will include that in the show notes. It was an interview that this person, I think he's a software developer, his name is Brad Isaac, and the blog was in Life Hacker, where he at one time they have these open mic nights, and he ran into Jerry Seinfeld early in Jerry Seinfeld's career, just right after he, I think, started his show. And Jerry was constantly trying to hone his skill, right? He wanted to keep on improving. He wasn't satisfied. And before Jerry went on stage, Brad had a chance to have a quick word with Jerry. And Jerry was that time had his show, so he was definitely big, and he had also appeared on Johnny Carson's show many times. So Jerry was, before he had his show, had been doing that for like more than a decade, I believe. And he asked him, Jerry, so can you give me a tip on any advice on how I can become a good comic? And what Jerry told Brad was that, well, you have to write a joke every day, okay? But then he said that here's what I do. I write a joke every day, but what I also do is I call this technique that he called it the calendar system. And I said I put a big calendar in my kitchen or somewhere that you cannot miss it. And every time I write a joke, I take a red marker and put an X, a large X, so you can't miss it. And you keep doing that every day. Every day you write a joke, you put a big X. And then after a while, you'll start seeing a chain of X's. But the key thing to remember is you don't want to break the chain. And that's the key tip. Do not break the chain. When you break the chain, means that after a while, you'll break it again and again. And now it's not a habit. And then you just cannot develop that skill. And he said, that's the technique that I've been using. So when it comes to public speaking, this 330 challenge, after the 330 challenge, you can try this, include this calendar that Jerry Seinfeld used when he was developing as a comic. And every day you record a 3-minute speech, put an X, large, get a large calendar, not a small one, that everybody can see it. And maybe you can put a multiple calendar, one in the office, one at home, one everywhere, so you can't miss it. And go and keep putting the X's. And if you miss it, then everybody's going to see it, like, oh my God, he missed it. And you can use this for anything. Public speaking, you can use it for anything that you want to turn it into a habit. It could be getting rid of, not smoking, could be exercising, could be anything. But since we are talking about speaking, you can add this as part of a tool to your 330 challenge and then continue for 1 year. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a large calendar and keep putting X's every time I record a speech. So that's my 3-minute speech segment. I hope that helps, and maybe you can try that. At this point, I'll go to Julie so she can give her 3-minute speech.
Thanks, Jay. Just a point on that is you had given me the advice to use the phone, to use the audio recorder and do recording. I've been trying to do that again. I started, I dropped the ball, and I'm doing it again. And what I'm doing is a daisy chain. So what I do is I try to listen to the one before, and then I'm going to do a new one. So hopefully I won't break the chain. I appreciate that. So as I had mentioned, that I am writing a traveler version of a book, or a booklet, a summary. Actually, it's a little workbook on 10 stretches. They're very transformative stretches. And today I want to talk a little bit about the lineage or the history of it. So this, I'm going to go backwards. This stretch I've been doing for 10 years, on and off, and it has been really, really helpful. For myself, I was at 5-6 years ago, I was at a stage of depression, and I couldn't do anything. And Jay knows I'm a meditator. I could not sit. I could barely watch TV. The days that I was able to watch TV was a good day, But one thing I was able to do was I was able to go into one of these stretches and then just use it like a meditation technique and hold it for 5-10 minutes. And that really helped me. I have a friend that we do it online on Google Hangout. We've been doing it for a year. And she has had sciatica, and she also has had a vaginal dryness. And these stretches really help her, and she doesn't need to go to a doctor. They're easy stretches. You do them in what they call the yin yoga tradition, which means it's very gentle. It's not muscular at all. And the goal is to relax the connective tissues. So our body has two major kinds of tissues. One is the red blood cell tissues, and that's what our muscles are made out of. But in order for the muscle to connect to the bones, there are connective tissue. They're called connective tissue, tendons and ligaments. So it's a white part of the cells. In fact, every cell has connective tissue because the cell wall is white tissue. So because of the white tissue is connected to every cell in your body, when you work these connective tissues, you really work the whole body. I want to go a little bit into it that they work really well because they come from integration of many East and West teachings. On the Western side, Moshe Feldenkrais talks about when you change your body, you change your mind. So his movements are to introduce resilience and adaptability. Ida Rowe, who talks about our body, when it's aligned, it's efficient and doesn't take too much energy to move. And so in cases of illness, of trauma, the cells collapse and then it takes a non-efficient shape. And then we lose our ability to live efficiently. And you take a lot of energy just to stand up, for example. So Ida Rowe's techniques help to realign the body to its most efficiency. Along the other side, there is the Asian side. There is a Zen master in Hawaii. His name is Tanoi. He's a martial artist. He's very famous in Japan, and he's also a Zen master. He realized his Zen realizations through martial arts, and he's also a great healer. So there's a lot of energetic techniques embedded in there. Finally, Everett believes in that when we have emotional tension or PTSD, those stress and memories are stored in our cellular memory. And so by doing a cellular release through the stretches, you can change your emotional well-being and change your ability you can have the memory, but you don't have to feel the trauma. I will talk more about that, but my goal is to basically create a worksheet that you can use easily to do the stretches, the very simple yoga stretches. And the key is in the sequence. They're designed to peel away the layers of onion. They're actually a meditation in movement. So I would just say that I'm sure Jay will put my my information for email address, and I will be happy to send anybody a beta version. Thanks, Jay.
Right. So that's good. Is this for both male and for men and women, or you're targeting?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's for men and women. Actually, Everett is a man. Everett Ogawa. He's a Japanese man, and he's been doing this kind of healing work for about the last 40, 50 years. And this, he does body work, like structural integration. And these stretches came out of his own self-practice for self-maintenance and self-care.
Right. And I'm sure there'll be a stretch for people with back problems like myself.
Yes. Actually, there's a lot of emphasis on releasing the back.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, look forward to it. Yeah, I'm just hoping to learn more from you on that. All right, so I'm going to take a quick pause, and then we'll move to our first segment where we review a speech by Benjamon Bratton. Okay?
Thank you.
Can you mute your line?
Yes. Sorry. Here we go.
Okay, welcome to Speech Talk Live, episode 32, segment number one. In this segment, we're going to review a TEDx speech that was given by a professor from University of California, San Diego. I think he's a professor of philosophy and visual arts. His name is Benjamin Bratton. And he gives a speech, it's roughly about, I think, 11 minutes long, where he is against TED. You know, TED Talks, he's against TED. And he gives a lot of reasons on why he's against TED. So in this particular speech, before we go into the details of what he had to say, what I want, if you are ever looking at a speech, these are the questions that I want to kind of address. What did I like about the speech? And this could be, and of course, in this particular case, we're not talking to him, so it's almost like we are giving this input, and he can take a look at it at some point when he has time, or you can use it if you're ever giving a speech. So that's the first question. What did I like about the speech? What could I have done to make it better? Because that's important. You don't want to give people feedback if you can't tell them how to make it better. So be careful. When you give people feedback, you got to let them know what you would have done to make it better, not what they should have done, because that doesn't help them much. Then I look at specifically the body language that he uses throughout the speech. Did it help, enhance, or hurt his message? Because body language is very important. The fourth thing is the voice. Like, how does he project himself with his voice? Because voice is like it's your tool, right? That's what you use. Body language and voice. And then, of course, the content. What was the content? Did I understand it? And did it make sense? Was it understandable? And did it make me smarter? Because I'm looking at it from the audience point of view. And then the last one that we're going to talk about in the next segment is the ultimate question. And this was a persuasive speech. So the question is, was this speech persuasive? Yes or no? And that's pretty simple question. So let me start out by telling you what this speech he's trying to get across. Evidently, he has some issues with TED Talks. And he even calls it middlebrow megachurch infotainment. So he has a point of view that he's trying to convince us that TED is overrated. Okay, it's not doing what he thinks it should really be doing. So he has definitely a point of view, and he's entitled to that. We are all entitled to our opinion. And he gives a lot of reasons. He starts by saying that it's too simple. It's not going to change anything. It's nothing but an entertainment, right? And he goes on and gives all kinds of, and he even goes into the technology aspect, the E aspect. He called the economics and the design. And I think this he's a professor, so he's obviously very smart, and he has thought about this topic. The issue that I had with the speech is, and I'll be blunt right from the beginning, was it persuasive? No, it wasn't persuasive at all. I think the speech was geared towards, I don't know who, because he had a specific audience. I don't know whether he was speaking to the audience who was present there, or he's trying to reach the audience who's going to view it later. And I review a lot of speeches, and I have to be honest with you, I had a really hard time understanding this speech. It was very difficult. And I viewed this 3 times. Even the start of it was kind of not clear. All I know is that he doesn't like TED, but the way he goes on and explains it, he throws a lot of these jargon at you, ecological and this and that. And I don't think he needed to do any of that. So the question then is, how would I make this speech better? So overall, I would say Did I like this speech? No. Did it work for me? No. The question I ask is that at the end of the speech, all I could say is that this guy's smart, but it didn't make me any smarter or didn't make me persuade his point of view. In fact, it had a reverse effect. It made me more like Ted than not like Ted. So the speech did not work for me. So now the question is, what would I do to make it better? Okay. I think when you are going up against something like TED, which is, let's face it, very popular. People love TED. And I like TED. I didn't even know that there were people out there who didn't like TED, that there was something really wrong with TED. But I'm open to hearing about it. But if you're going to tell me that, then you got to really realize that you're in a real small minority. Majority of the people like TED. So the first thing he had to do here was he had to inject some humor right up front, saying like, I had to bring some security here because what I'm about to say, I want to make sure I get out of here alive. I think he should have started with some kind of humor because he's basically going to knock Ted at a TED event, okay? So he should have started with the humor. He should have shown some humor, like he's not going to take himself seriously. Professor Bratton takes himself too seriously here. He's not having fun out there. He's got this idea that TED isn't good, and I think he's the only one who believes that. Well, evidently that's not true. I looked at it. There are like 493,000 people who have viewed this speech, and I guess my view's in a minority. Most of the people there love this speech. They liked it. I don't know if they loved the speech or they liked his message. So it looks like there are a lot of people who don't like TED. So I think if I was coaching Professor Bratton, I would say first, Professor Bratton, lighten up. Start with some humor here because you're a very small minority. You're not going to change people's mind regarding TED. You want to make them smarter, like what TED could do better. And he gives all sorts of reasons, but he never really gives like what he would do. What kind of, like he's giving a TED talk. If this is his TED talk, let me tell you, nobody's watching this, okay? This is the type of talk that TED gives. The purpose of TED is they take a complicated message and they simplify it so that people understand it. Then it's up to them to do whatever they want with it. But at least that information is now been spread. What he's saying is that TED should be more like a college course, a seminar. I mean, come on, that's just not realistic. So I'm not convinced. I think his arguments are not well presented here. And he just goes off into things that I don't think many people understand. So I think there's a lot the speech that can be done with this speech to make it more interesting. He needs to simplify it first. He talks about the first thing that he doesn't like TED, oversimplification. Well, right, that's what TED makes, that makes TED Speak so popular. They do simplify things that are very difficult for anybody, and they drop it down so many levels so that just about everybody is going to understand it. And TED, it's not that people just take TED and then just say, okay, this is the only, what TED does is it allows you to explore. That's what I do. Once I watch a TED speech, like for example, I'll give you Amy Cuddy's speech she gave. And then I went and did more research. I went and just recently purchased her book, Presence, that allows me to go into the science behind that. So there's a lot so TED is at the top level to kind of introduce something so that everybody can understand it. Then it's up to the individual what they want to do with it. And I don't think Professor Bratton really understands that that's what makes TED so popular and its service. I think it's a really good service that they disseminate this type of message to the world, and then everybody's familiar with it. And the one thing I'll point out that he said something which he said he was at some event, and I think it was some astrophysicist who tried to pitch something, and the person said that, oh, I wish he was more like Malcolm Gladwell. And he makes some kind of a snide remark like, Malcolm Gladwell, like who's he? He's a journalist. Like, we're a professor, we do research. I think that was uncalled for. I don't think you do that. Malcolm Gladwell is a great communicator. What Malcolm Gladwell does is he reads these abstracts that people write, these journals that nobody reads in different publications, and then he takes it, simplifies it, ties it to a story so that everybody can understand it. Now, I can see that if you're a professor, you would be jealous of that because it's like, hey, why is he taking credit? Well, he's taking credit because he's getting to the people. That message would never get to the people if it wasn't people like Malcolm Gladwell. So I don't think he understands the value that Malcolm Gladwell adds. And let's face it, Malcolm Gladwell is a highly successful author. If he wasn't doing something that people wanted to read, he wouldn't be that successful. Perhaps he can learn from Malcolm Gladwell. The same speech, Malcolm Gladwell would not have presented it like that. So anyway, at this point, I'm going to stop and let Julie give her feedback. But I think this speech was a lost opportunity, and he could have done a lot with it. And also that at times I kind of felt like he was speaking to himself and didn't care whether the audience even understood what he was saying. I don't think he really cared. At times I was like kind of rooting for him. I said, break out of that, break out of that. Tell me more so I can really be rooting for you. He just never did that. He just kept on talking the way he wanted to get his message across, and that message was muddled, in my opinion. Julie, what did you think of this speech?
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, thank you. First of all, I think you are a little more harsh than I am, but basically I agree. I thought that he alienated the audience because he's in a tech group and he's calling the middle brow. You know, that's like that's an insult. And then he insulted Malcolm Gladwell. At first, actually, I did it the way you suggested, which is at first I look at the language, at the body language, and then I look at the content. You know, the body language was not friendly. You know, he's basically a professor doing his speech, so it's in alignment with the way he delivered the message. The message I get is that basically. TED is infomercial gone wild. It pretends to be something else, but it's really not solving the problem. And TED, he thinks, what I get is TED thinks just having ideas and sharing ideas is world changing. And he's saying that you can't just, talking about ideas, the way TED does it may be entertaining, but it's not effective for transformation. And then he went on to talk about different aspects of shallowness. Like he talks about instead of the TED, the E in the middle stands for entertainment. He said, well, why not use it for economics? And I would love to know what that means, you know. So I felt like he was just creating negative jargons and then replace it with an alternative jargon. But he never really went deep into any of it. So at the end, I was, like you said, I rooted for the alternatives, but I couldn't really know what the alternative was. So in terms of what could I have done to make it better? I think instead of having a shopping list of all these ideas, I think he could maybe just take one idea and bring it down to human experiential level. You know, I think he was way up there talking about lofty ideas, but I couldn't relate to it. And I think I can understand pretty complicated ideas if it was explained to me, but it wasn't explained. It was just floating up here. So in a certain ways, I think if Ted was being entertaining, he was being supercilious. I would love to hear more about his ideas because I think some of them have real value, and I would like to know what the alternative is. So I would suggest that it's better for him to take one idea and really break it down so people can relate to it, and then say, here's those other ideas, because then I will be hooked and I will go and find out what else he's talking about. His use of body language and his use of voice was, you know, acceptable, but nothing. It's certainly, again, not emotionally connecting me to anything. So I like his ideas. I would like to know more about his ideas. So that's part of the content. But he left me frustrated. It's like he's showing me this is what you could eat, but he's not serving me the meal. So I wish he was better at it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, now that you said I'm harsh, I'm like afraid to say anything more. So let me just be fair to Professor Bratton. Professor Bratton, you can ignore everything that we're saying here because when I look in the YouTube, you have 493,000 views. When I record my speech, I get only four. So right away, you don't have to listen to anything I say because, there are 493 and most, I think like only like 1% or so do not like this speech. So we're in a really a small minority, just like you are in a small minority when you say that you don't like TED. So the other thing I would point out is you see the thing is this is the thing, this is a persuasive speech, right? So when it's a persuasive speech there has to be some emotion behind it, and there were no techniques really. There were some techniques used, but I don't think it was done in an effective manner. uh, I don't know what he used this technique. I guess it could be like a maxim, but it, I guess some people commented on this: more Copernicus, less Tony Robbins. And if you're going to say that, then put some emphasis behind it: more Copernicus, less Tony Robbins. You just can't leave it at that. There was a lot of stuff where audience had to think really hard. He was bringing stuff from all over the place that might be okay in an academic setting where people are of its same level, but not when it's a speech presented to people who may not be familiar. I don't think he had any respect for people who didn't know what he knew. And that's the mark of a good speaker. He assumed too much of his audience, that they know who Coney was. They understood this, they understood that. Then he uses this word placebo politics and placebo this and placebo that. I think if you really want your audience to understand it, then just say placebo. What does he mean by that? Placebo politics. Never, there's no definition of that. And yes, that would be simplifying it. And then he would feel like, oh, I'm falling into the trap. He's almost telling this that the audience has to get to his level, not that he had to get to the audience's level. And that's the part I just did not like about this speech. And that's not what a public speaking is all about. Public speaking is all about you getting to your audience's level. He can learn a lot from Donald Trump, by the way. Okay. Donald Trump would not give a speech like this. He would just say, Ted is stupid. They don't even make sense. I mean, yeah, you may not like his tone, but you'll understand what he's saying and what he's feeling. And I think he should have taken his professor hat off and put on a Donald Trump hat and tell us exactly what he thought of TED. Instead, he gives us a lot of stuff here that was like eating flax seeds. You can't eat too much of that. It just doesn't work. I felt like I was eating breakfast, my morning breakfast with oatmeal with flax seeds and soy milk. You know what? It's fine for breakfast, but I don't know if I want to have that for lunch and dinner. So, Professor Bratton, please, no more flax seeds. I know you're smart, but we may not be as smart as you are, and you got to really bring it down to our level. So, if you're ever giving a speech in the future that's outside the academic setting, I think some of the things we're telling you will make you a much fantastic speaker. And one other thing is, your opening has to be captivating. Use some humor, smile a little, laugh a little, and don't pace back and forth like that. It's distracting, even when you're watching it on video. So otherwise, you did a great job. Julie, any closing thoughts?
Well, you sure injected humor into this one. Thank you.
Let me just say, Professor, we're just doing this in a jest. We take this very seriously, and we think that there was a lot. That's this speech. I was like, I was looking for a humorous speech, an entertaining speech, and at the same time, you could have conveyed all your points. And it might have been entertaining in an academic setting, but when we look at other TED speeches, it's not what you believe in; it's the way you communicated that. That's the key thing we're trying to point out here. So. And we could be completely wrong, but that's how we feel. So we want to be, fair to you. Thank you. I'm going to take a brief pause, and then we'll move to segment 2. Hello, welcome to Speech Talk Live, episode number 32, and this is segment number 2. In this segment, we're going to talk about the ultimate question. So first, let me kind of explain what I mean by this. I recorded a video that kind of explains it, but I'll give a quick summary. So ultimate question comes from the customer service side, and Fred Reichheld wrote a book. In fact, I have it here. Here we go. Can you see it? The Ultimate Question. This might be the older version, and this is about a question you ask somebody, whether it's in a consumer space, customers, whether they would recommend a company, a product, or a service, right? That is the ultimate question. And then based on how somebody, usually it's like a 10-point, right? It's 1 to 10, with 1 being no way, hell no, I'm never going to recommend you. 9 and 10 meaning 9 or 10 indicates, yes, absolutely, I'm going to be your best advocate. And that's what you want, right? Everything else, like, was the place clean? Were the people friendly? Was the place professional? All those questions they're not meaningless if they're not going to recommend you, because you want person to not only come back, but you want them to tell other people so they'll come back. That drives more profits as you get more customers, right? They spread the word. So I took this concept and said, wait a second, this same concept could also be applied when we give a speech. Like before you give a speech, what is the ultimate question you would want to ask? Sort of like a pre-mortem, like, instead of doing it at the end, just do it before and ask them, what is the ultimate question that you want to know? Forget about, like, was your body language good? Were you projecting yourself? Did you look confident? All the thing is fine for you, but that's not the ultimate question. The ultimate question is, depending on what kind of speech you're giving, whether it's intro, whether it's impromptu, informative, or persuasive. So let's take a look at if it's an informative speech, did you make the audience, did the speaker make you smarter, right? That would be the ultimate question. And if they say yes, forget about anything else they put down. You succeeded. Let's say if it was a persuasive speech, the ultimate question, in my opinion, is, was the speech persuasive? Yes or no? That's all you want to know. You don't care about whether the stock issues were good and all that. That's all details. At the end, that doesn't mean anything. If they agree that your speech was persuasive, you succeeded. Similarly, intro. Is that person memorable or not memorable? You could introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Jayosa, and I coach speaking, and I do this and that. And then they're meeting other people. And at the end, they're like, yeah, that intro wasn't that memorable. I failed. Simple as that. Same thing with impromptu, right? Was the impromptu convincing, not convincing? I don't know what the ultimate question is, but what I'm trying to point to is that you need to come up with that ultimate question before you give any speech, whether it's an intro, whether it's an informative, impromptu, or persuasive. And this could happen in a one-on-one conversation, could happen in a small group, or it can happen in a large audience. Nail that ultimate question before you give a speech. Julie, what do you think of this? And what is the ultimate question you have for all 4 speeches? You're still muted, Julie.
Thanks, Jay. I don't have an ultimate question. I know we've talked about this several times. I like to say, like, for the informative speech, did I get smarter? Did I learn something? And I think for the persuasive speeches, am I changing? Am I changing my attitude? Am I changing my behavior? And I like what you added today, which is in the introduction speech, am I memorable? Can I be remembered? I think that is actually very interesting because, as you know, before we started the speech, we talked about what's your one sentence, that brands you or tells people who you are, and we came up for you was when you I am how I speak, or I am what I speak. I thought that was very effective for what you're doing with the coaching process. It underscores a lot of things in a single sentence. I think my I guess getting down to the bottom line, my ultimate question was, what was my goal, and did I reach my goal? You know. I also thought the way you did the presentation, you seem very relaxed, and you seem more relaxed than in previous speeches you have done. So that was very nice to see. And I thought that your hand gestures were good, like that. And that's about all I have for the ultimate question. I think that what you said right now is also interesting. That is a pre-mortem. Maybe in a worksheet, we want to say what's the ultimate question or the ultimate goal. So when we're done with the speech, we can say, did we reach my goal or not? I think that's a very effective way to create a speech. So that's a nice tool. Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing I want to make it clear is the ultimate question is not, it's not the question you're asking. It's the question you want the audience to be. It's the question you want the audience to answer, right? That's the ultimate question. So I just want to make it clear, because this is not a question you're asking yourself. This is the question you want the audience to answer before you give a speech. So that's the pre-mortem part of it. So for example, like I said, if I was doing an intro, the question, let's say if after I did the intro, somebody went to the audience and said, hey, can you fill out this little form? And the question would be, the ultimate question, was Jay Oza memorable? Yes or no? That's the ultimate question right there. And let's say if I was giving an informative speech, afterwards I give it, the ultimate question I want them to answer is, did Jay Oza make you smarter with what he talked about? Something like that. That would be my ultimate question. And similarly with Persuasive, this is my ultimate question. Everybody has to come up with their ultimate question first before they give a speech. So again, the point here is, this is the question you want the audience to answer after you give a speech, but we're bringing it into the front, so that becomes a pre-mortem. So any closing thoughts, Julie?
Yes, when I said the goal, basically I'm saying that's the ultimate question I want my audience to answer. That's what I meant when I said the goal of the speech. So if my speech is to tell people to do something, the ultimate question for me is, are you going to do it? And so the way I will frame it is, my goal is for the audience to do it. So that I'm reverse engineering it into what my goals are as I reach for that question, as I try to imagine what the ultimate question answered by the audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let me put you on a spot. So next week, you're going to facilitate a session on reading poetry to become a better speaker. So
yes.
What is the ultimate question? So assume you did that speech right now, and now you're saying, okay, I'm going to do a quick survey to see how I did. So what is the ultimate question you want me to answer?
Well, I have two questions. The first one is, are you going to read some poems?
No, I just want one. There can only be one ultimate
okay.
question.
Will you read some poems? Because it's a persuasive speech.
So that's your ultimate question. That after listening, so this is the ultimate question that I would get. Now that after listening to Julie Finkelstein's segment on reading poems, does this make you more likely to, follow this technique? Yes or no? That's the question?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a question you want to write it down. And that's the question you want to write it down before you give your speech. That's what I'm trying to hit for. So that now you have a focus, that's the question. You've got to get a yes on that, because so that means that you got to give me everything so that at the end I say, yes, she's convinced me that I need to try this technique. It's something I need to take a look at. So this is sort of real time. We're kind of brainstorming on how this would work. So I just wanted to kind of say that's really the pre-mortem, since you're giving this next week. So this is the pre-mortem that you would go through. So that's the question that I would write down. Okay, at this point, I think anything else? So I think
that's great.
Okay, so I'll take a brief pause, and then welcome to Speech Talk Live, episode number 32. My name is Jay Oza, and this is segment number 3. Now, I had recorded a video and I gave it a really provocative title: Why Persuasive Speeches Suck. Okay. I apologize if you're offended, but there was a reason for that. I review a lot of persuasive speeches, both on the Coursera platform. A lot of students, record their persuasive speeches, and also TED Talks and others. In fact, we just reviewed a persuasive speech by Professor Benjamin Bratton from University of California, San Diego. And most of these persuasive speeches are not that persuasive. And I was like thinking, why is that the case? What's going on here? And I think one of the things I think that I see as a reason that they're not persuasive is there's not that uh, emotional persuasion in these speech. There's no emotional feeling. Emotional feeling is very important in persuasive speeches. So the question is, what gives you that? First of all, you have to believe in what you're saying. Okay, you got to believe it, but it's not whether you believe it. You got to convince the audience. And the way to convince the audience is using the stylistic techniques that great speakers use. It could be using a maxim, could be using an anaphora. I mean, the alliteration. I mean, there are all these techniques that are available at your disposal that you have to use. But before you try to convince somebody and write your speech, you need to do this first. If somebody asks you, like, what are you ticked off at? Like, what ticks you off about the presidential election? What ticks you off about football? What ticks you off about? You should be able to describe that in one of those stylistic technique before you go into the details of it. So if somebody says, what do you don't like about football? I have to say, I hate football because of this. I hate football because of the games are too long. I hate football because there are too many commercials. I hate football because the games are just, not close. Now I have an anaphora right there. Now I can take that and turn it into a speech. So first, I ask yourself, what are you so ticked off about? What are you trying to persuade? Can you capture that in some sort of a stylistic technique? And then you can move next to the stock issues that Professor McGarity talks about in his course, Introduction to Public Speaking. The ills, what's the problem? The blame, what's the cause of the problem? The cure, what's the solution, and what are the consequences of fixing it? And then the call to action, right? So those are the stock issues: the ills, the blames, the cures, the consequences, and the call to action. Now, in the course, I think the reason why very few people, in fact, I haven't found a single student who have ever used any of these stylistic techniques effectively, because when I usually give a grade, I have never given anybody even a good. Most of them are below adequate, and I had to be so hard on them, but that is the fundamental part of a persuasive speech, especially for this course that many people take. And I think what happens is that the course is really an excellent course, but I think the way and I think Professor McGarity tells many times that these techniques are very important, but some of the students are not getting it. And I think the reason is that the course starts out by going into persuasive speech, by looking at the stock issues. And when he gets to the stylistic techniques in video lecture week 9, he uses these examples of famous speakers like Malcolm X, Bill Clinton, Winston Churchill, John F. Kennedy, you name it. And I think what people think is like those techniques are for great speeches. And I think that's not the way you want to look at it. Those are techniques you should be using in everyday persuasion, anytime you're giving a persuasive speech, whether it's one-on-one, in a small group, or in front of a large audience. So these techniques are not for the great speakers. They're for everybody, for all speakers. And so the technique, what I'm telling people is, if they're taking this course, that before you even get to the week 7, week 8, go right to the stylistic technique and understand them thoroughly. Then come up with it. Like, what is something that's ticking you off? And use one of those techniques to describe the problem using the stylistic technique. And then you can work on the stock issues. And I think if you do that, your speech is going to be persuasive and quite powerful. So that's what I do. and I gave an example in my video. I did that recently for a meeting that I had in school related to some issue that had come up with my son's son being in the marching band and awarding varsity letter. And I essentially did exactly what I'm telling you. I found out what the stylistic technique I wanted to use, and I used two of them, Maxim and an Afra. And then it allowed me to really think of exactly what I'm trying to persuade. And it worked because they eventually decided that they did not want to do that. They wanted to award varsity letter to anybody who was in the marching band. So try that and let me know what you think. Julie, what do you think of like, how do you make a speech persuasive? And do you have any thoughts on this?
Jerry, thank you. This is a very important topic. And I can share with you that it's mental burnout. You know, as you say that the course is excellent, but there is so much to it. I think most of us just can't absorb all that information in 1 week. In the sense that in a knowledge-based class, you would just learn the facts and memorize it. But this is a practice-oriented class. So each of those techniques probably take, a week just to practice to get the idea of it before we can even integrate it into our speech. But your point is very well taken, is until you can have some kind of connection with your audience, you don't really have an effective speech. And these techniques that are shown, alliteration, anaphora, aphora, they're all tools to help us to become more dramatic, more emotionally expressive, which connects to my speech next week. In my speech, I have used a very simple repetition. So for every new idea, I have a very succinct sentence. So for example, I say, practicing reading poems is effective because poems are short. Poems are short is an advantage because you can repeat the poem many times. Poems are dramatic. Poems are dramatic because they contain many emotional and vocal variety, and they also have many devices such as alliteration, onomatopoeia. Practicing with dramatic pieces help us to have greater dramatic expression. So that's the technique I use. I use a simple sentence and I repeat it at the beginning of the paragraph to underscore and organize my ideas. So I actually just used it this time and I found it very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think so here's the thing. If you're giving a persuasive speech, take risk and do it. I mean, especially for a course. So I think somehow people are fearful of using these techniques for whatever reason. Maybe they don't think they need it. Maybe they think that they can't pull it off. Maybe they think that they're not good enough speakers to use it, that these are only tools for, great speakers. And my point is that you got to use it now, because these are not things that are for great speakers. The great speakers are great because they know how to use this, plus they have a content. And I give examples in my video there that Reagan's this is what people are going to remember your speech. So you can't ignore this, right? I mean, we just listened to the speech from Benjamin Bratton about him not liking TED, but there wasn't any maxim about that you could take away. I mean, the only one I got was something about Copernicus and less Tony Robbins. Okay, but he could have said that right in the beginning. And saying, okay, this talk is going to try to convince you that, and in fact, I'll get you the exact line, more Copernicus, less Tony Robbins. More Copernicus, less Tony Robbins. And then he could have gone and said, what do I mean by that? I'm just saying that's just, we had a whole segment on that, so you can take a look at. The other thing I'll point out is, let me point to the speech by Bill Clinton, the 2012 nominating speech that he gives at the Democratic National Convention. And Bill Clinton is a great speaker by any measurement. And what he does in the beginning, he starts with an anaphora that, I'm here to nominate a man. I'm looking at something that I want a man. That's his thing. That's his anaphora. I want a man. And he goes on to describe all of Obama's accomplishment. And then he does something that only Bill Clinton can do and pull it off. And this is something that when you watch it, it goes by quickly, but this is what makes him a really such a powerful speaker. The last, typically 3 is what you pretty much want to stop after 3, because then it gets repetitive and it loses its impact. But Bill Clinton does something very clever. On the last one, when he says, I want a man, and he says, this is what he does. You got to watch it, and I'll provide the link. I want a man who had the good sense of marrying Michelle Obama. I call that the anaphora plus, because that has nothing to do with his overall presidential achievement, but it's his personal achievement, right? And if you're ever giving a speech, that's always available to you. Any event you go to, whether it's like you're speaking at a wedding, you're speaking at a corporate event, you're speaking at any event, that plus part is always there. Use it, because what that does is if you use it in the beginning, it makes you very likable. And once people like you, then the next part is they have to trust you. And if you've been introduced well, if somebody's introduced you and established your credibility, then the trust factor you get with it. But a lot of speakers don't realize the importance of likability. And the likability has to happen in the beginning. You can't suddenly become likable at the end. That's too late. People start tuning out. So a lot of these techniques, it's a little advanced actually if you're like still going through the course, but they all kind of work together. And you can kind of go crazy, like, what do I do? What do I do? And when people are taking the course, and I think what Julie said is absolutely correct, it can get quite overwhelming. That's why I say that this course is not that easy. You can kind of sleepwalk you through this course and not learn anything, because that's what this is. There's a lot of there. You can just do a speech. And the thing what happens with persuasive speech is, if you don't add these techniques and you don't make it really powerful with your emotion, then you're turning your persuasive speech into an informative speech. And an informative speech may inform people, but it's not persuading them. So it's a fail. You can have all the great points, but if you're not persuading them, that there is no, they don't want to spread the message, or they don't want to take action, or they're not even persuaded, then the speech was a waste of time. So you really do need to understand this. Otherwise, every time you're giving a persuasive speech, you're just not going to be effective. So Julie, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much. It occurs to me that when I gave my first informative speech, a fellow mentor, Somian, said it sounded like the first time I gave an informative speech, he said it sounded like a persuasive speech. And the first time I put a persuasive speech in a video, he said it sounded like an informative speech. So I think I created a hybrid, which is fine. But in the end, I think it's really good to develop those persuasive skills, whether someone's doing informative speech or persuasive speech. Because the persuasive tools, as you mentioned, they make you connectable, approachable, and then when they like you and they trust you, then they can buy your message, but not before that. So yeah, I think we need to go through each of those techniques, maybe one a week, and then really demonstrate how we can use it in ordinary speech, or at least pick one of your favorites or one of my favorites and do that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion, Julie. I think that's a good suggestion, and I think we could like take one each, whichever one you're comfortable with. And what we can do is use the one that somebody famous has used, and then you can say, here's what I would do. Here's how I've used it, similar technique in my situation. So you're kind of showing, like, let's say if it's Obama or Malcolm X or somebody, Reagan, like he uses a maxim, and then show, oh, see, here's how Reagan did it in his famous speech. But you know what? We also can do it in a speech where we're having with one-on-one with somebody, or in a school setting, any kind of small meeting at work. And here's how I used it. So that way people will understand that, hey, these techniques are available for all of us, not just for great speakers. And the other
Yeah.
thing you can do is that now that you're getting that comment, you can just swap your speeches, and then that solves the problem.
You know what? I think we can explore that at the end of the meeting, which is your new technique.
Right. All right. So at this point, unless you have any questions, any comments about the show, we can wrap it up, and then we'll come back and get into our miscellaneous talk, which we normally don't include in our when we post it. It's just something we talk about, the random topics related to next week, etc. So anything else before I wrap this show? Okay, so thank you all for watching, and if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions on how we can make this better, we certainly welcome your criticism, but all I ask you is, if you're going to criticize it, then tell us how we can make it better, because without that, it doesn't really help us much, right? So we welcome any kind of criticism, and but we want to get better. So criticize, but also make us better, and we'd appreciate that. So at this point, I'll close this out, and we'll see you next week when we do our next episode 33.